Hey everyone, it's Future Blevins here. Just want to give the disclaimer that there's a couple of bad words in this episode, but it's nothing really too bad. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the Payload, a high noon production. I am your host, the Blevins, and we've got a star-studded cast, including some veterans of Around the Payload and some newbies and some throwback webcams from the old Gosu Gamers weeklies way back in the day. But let's jump right into this and introduce our hosts for the day. We've got Pesto Enthusiast, who is the founder of Junkertown Journal and a veteran here on Around the Payload. Thank you for coming back.
Nice to be here.
And we also have the one and only Sized Show Overwatch League desk analyst. If you guys don't like, he's on the Overwatch League. Like, how do you not know who he is? Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It should be good.
I mean, most recently, of course, a streaming food with Bren, which is probably even more entertaining than Overwatch League. But
still just sat in the bottom of my stomach. Causing...
We are also joined here by Slasher, esports journalist and Overwatch analyst. Thank you for coming on, sir.
I just want to let you know that I don't have my good webcam with me, so this is where the throwback is coming in. And if I sound bad, you know, it's just how it is.
It's Pesto's fault for sure. And we're also missing the plant, of course.
Yeah, well, it's back there. It's back behind me. It's kind of dying. It got too big. And now it needs more sunlight.
Too big for its own britches. But speaking of too big, we, of course, are rounded out here by Blazin' Bob, host of Watchpoint Radio and OWL Recap. Thank you for coming back, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I'm excited.
Always a pleasure. But for those of you who are first-time listeners here, this show is basically very, very similar to Around the Horn on ESPN, but definitely different enough to not get a cease and desist order from ESPN, or at least for me to ignore it. We're going to be going around and talking about different topics in Overwatch League. All of our hosts here are going to get a chance to talk about them, and I, as the master of ceremonies, are going to be giving out as well as taking away points that mean so very, very much at the end of the day. But if you guys hear a sound that sounds kind of like this, it is me giving out points. It's not you missing your quick play game. But without further ado, let's jump right into this. And we're going to talk about the elephant in the room here right off the bat. Let's just talk about it. XQC released from Dallas Fuel. I'm sure that unless you've been living under a literal rock, you know what happened, why it happened, all sorts of controversy and whatnot behind it. But we're going to talk about what does this mean for the fuel, for the league, for everything. Pesto, let's start with you. What does this XQC release mean?
Sure. So I think this is actually, I mean, obviously not quite this dramatic, but this is a problem that a lot of people that go into professional entertainment hit at eventually, which is that there's more to being a professional gamer than just playing the game. You have to look at the industry, you have to look at the money behind it, and I think that that's where XQC really fell afoul. So, I mean, obviously people want to watch professionals play a game, but advertisers want to get their products in front of those viewers, especially in the case of esports, because the teen and 20 male demographic is really hard for them to reach. And so the money that powers us all, the paycheck that these players are drawing, the sponsorship deals that allow the league to function, you're talking about media rights deals, you're talking about sponsorships, you're talking about advertisement. And professional gamers don't have to be role models, but they do have to realize that they're part of this industry and that there are behavioral expectations, and those behavioral expectations around the cardinal rule of the entertainment industry don't scare away the advertiser. And I mean, XQC built his brand around a manic personality and has only moved more towards that because that's what his stream likes. And you can't be a professional player if you don't have...
Right. There's definitely a difference between being an entertainer that is self-employed and employed by yourself, and someone who's representing an organization in a league. But Sideshow, obviously you were dealing with this at least in some capacity head on as an Overwatch League desk analyst. So what are your thoughts here on XQC?
I think the first thing to tackle it, I'll give my point of view, which is that XQC was a great tank player as well, and it's disappointing that he's now outside of the league, because he was that was something that Dallas Fuel were missing. Now they've got OGE coming in, but I think the wider point here is kind of interesting because it's a brand new league, right? And it's the first time that they've had to really deal with stuff like this and setting precedents for people who are going against their rules, or certain, like, how do you find them? How do you suspend them? What's the process going forwards? I think it's really interesting as well when you look at the report that came out today that said that Morte, one of the previous Overwatch players, now a coach, is planning to start a players association as well, according to the Sports Business Journal. And so it seems that with the professionalization of the Overwatch League and the limitations that that's going to put on the players, it's going to start a dialogue back and forth between a potential players union or just the players themselves when they converse with the league, and start some dialogue about, like, was this the correct level of punishment? Are they going to carry on with this going forwards? Like, I think it'll start to set things more in stone.
Yeah, there's definitely been talks of the players, of a players association and the need for it since before the league even started. But Slasher, I want to get your thoughts here on this whole situation with XQC, the Dallas Fuel, the league, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, I even told XQC a day before he was released that there was a good possibility he was going to be released, and that eventually did happen. And he kind of understood that that was a very strong possibility, so he wasn't so surprised after it was announced that was going to happen. You know, there's a lot going on here. One, Morte has been working on this Players Association for at least a year and a half and hasn't been able to get it off the ground. So even though it is going to be coming in the future, it had no bearing on what happened here. And XQC had no representation beyond his agent in anything that happened with Blizzard. And from talking to both XQC and his agent, neither have any official comment on the matter about the situation that happened, but he had at least a 1-year contract with the Dallas Fuel, and he was released early, and we still do not have details on how exactly that process happened, because the Fuel were able to legally release him from the team. So something must be in the contract that says that if you get a certain number of infractions, or depending on how the severity of the infractions are, the team is able to release the player. And right now, there is no players association to fight for the players. There are only individual agents up against one multi-million-dollar teams that are working directly with Blizzard, who not only controls the game, but controls the league. So the players have not a lot of leverage in this situation to take advantage of. So yes, was XQC extremely immature throughout this entire process? Yes, of course. But he went into a situation where you're dealing with a very nuanced area of emotes and trying to type in chat. And honestly, I think he got screwed here. Considering the details that we have and the fact that players don't have proper representation, I think he got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, there's definitely, it is certainly not a black and white situation between right and wrong and whatnot, for sure. And I think if nothing else, that some good can potentially come of this eventually. But Bob, last words here as a resident Dallas Fuel fan. How are you feeling here, and what do you think about this whole situation?
Well, I think everybody hit on it. They are setting a precedent, but I don't know if the league is setting a precedent since Dallas Fuel was the ones that actually released XQC. So the league did find him, and they did suspend him, but they didn't actually kick him out. So I don't know. This is more of a precedent that you see Dallas Fuel setting, and not really the league. I don't see his release as anything that the league has actually done.
Definitely interesting. And I think this is probably just the first of many steps that are going to be taken in this entire area. But let's move on here and talk a little bit about the Los Angeles Gladiators. Stage 1 performance pretty lackluster, and even the beginning of the stage has been sort of all right, and then the acquisition of Fissure has really kind of jump-started this team. They got a win 4-0 versus the Valiant, as well as arguably upsetting the London Spitfire this week 3-1. So, Sideshow, here's the question: are LA Gladiators a real team now?
Yeah, I think they are a real team now. I think there are a couple of caveats to this as well, though, is that, yes, the acquisition of Fisher was a big upgrade. It's also the biggest single upgrade that we've seen across the entirety of the Overwatch League. So they got very, I don't want to say lucky, because they obviously picked up the guy and he was available at the time. It was like right time, right opportunity. But they have, it must be said that was a massive individual upgrade. And also when you look at their game against the Spitfire, you got to say that they were fielding like this B team that probably doesn't get as much scrim time as they normally do, even though it's the former like GC Busan. They aren't using that as their A team. They aren't prioritizing scrim time on that team. They're using Profit and Gesture in their other team as well. So it wasn't a full intensity Spitfire that they were taking on. I think they took their foot off the gas pedal a bit, and should they meet them again, I would expect Spitfire to have a bit more respect for them.
For sure. Slasher, what are your thoughts here? Can we expect maybe a playoff berth here from the LA Gladiators?
I think that's definitely a possibility. I mean, this team was always really good. They had Surefour, they had Asher, but they had problems in the tank and off-tank area. I mean, I just reported that they're going to be getting Void onto their team, and that is going to be an upgrade in their off-tank, and they're only going to get better through the season. He probably won't be starting until Stage 3, so I don't know if it'll be so much at the end of Stage 2, but this team certainly has a chance. But don't get me wrong, they still have 2 of their wins against Shanghai and Shock, who are not very good teams, and them rolling over those 2 teams are, not so indicative of what happened. They also lost against Fuel, so one of the losses that they have are against one of the worst teams in the league right now, so they still have problems. But being able to get Fissure, and we've all seen how important the main tank role is in Overwatch League, it may very well be the most important role of any on any role of the team. So them being able to get such a good player, him having a chip on his shoulder of getting sold from Spitfire to come here, he really wanted to beat that team, even though they were playing the B team, as Sideshow mentioned. I think that was a big part of their success so far.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely going to fuel yourself to beat the team that just got rid of you. But Bob, what are your thoughts here? Obviously, your Fuel have beaten the Gladiators before, but they seem to be almost an entirely different team. What are your thoughts on the Gladiators here?
They're looking really good, and they have a third DPS that's really coming up. Hydration. They had good tanks. They had good heals. They get a good main take in Fisher, and all of a sudden, yeah, they're good. Do I think they're going to do a playoff berth for the Stage 2 finals? I don't know. Like, it's been pointed out, they haven't played really strong teams yet, but they kind of remind me of what Boston did in this, like right around this time in Stage 1.
Yeah, I mean, Valiant is certainly a decent team, to say the least, and even the B team of London Spitfire is still probably in the top half of Overwatch League teams. But Pesto, last words here on the LA Gladiators. What are your thoughts?
So I'm going to go against everyone else and say that I'm not. Fissure is definitely a welcome boost, but I don't think the team has enough other threats. I think that the teams in the league that have the best coaching are going to build around trying to neutralize Fissure, and I don't think right now that Gladiators really has the tools to punish teams that do that. I think that I'm still not convinced about their DPS core. I think that Surefour he was a beast when the game was young, but he's been surpassed by a lot of other players, and flexibility means a lot less than it used to. I think Asher is one of the less consistent, and in terms of skill ceiling, not one of the best tracers in the league. And I think Hydration is very solid, but he's not a lock in the roster at all times. So I think they have a lot of solid pieces, and one spectacular piece is going to win you some games. But I think they're not a lock for the top 6 at the end of the season. And even if they do sneak into the playoffs, I don't think they're going to make a deep run. So solid team, but not going to be. I think they're going to drop off a little bit as the rest of the stage goes on, and probably into the year.
Definitely a better team than we've seen. No one, I think, can argue that. But let's move on and talk about coaching here in Overwatch League. This has been talked about a lot since before Overwatch League even started. We've drawn comparisons to professional, traditional sports rather, and sort of the differences that a coach has between esports and professional sports, where if a team's doing bad, all eyes are on the coach, and it doesn't seem to really necessarily being that way so far in Overwatch League. So Slasher, I'll start with you. How much responsibility should a coach take here for both the successes and the failures of a team in Overwatch League?
I'm going to say quite a lot, especially considering how so far through the entirety of competitive Overwatch, whoever had the better players for that meta always seems to win the league, whether it was Apex or E-League or DreamHack, and now in Overwatch League, if you have the players that are the best heroes in that position, and that is the meta at that time, you are most likely going to win. So because you have the players to put themselves in a good position, it is the coach's job to make sure those players are playing the heroes they need to play on the maps they need to play, and to be able to counter the other team that you're playing against. And I've seen, most recently, I've been quite hard on Kai. I know that there's been a lot of defending them, but how they're still trying to get things together, and it's more on the players. But for their loss recently against the Mayhem, for Mayhem to come back and win 3 straight maps, that is on Kai's responsibility and fault that Fuel lost that series. Bad decision making in terms of the players that were chosen for each of the maps, and then because of that, the heroes that they chose were really not in line with I think they should have gone to win. And that's an example of how it can go bad. And I think on the other side, you see Seoul and New York, who have coaches that have been with those players for quite a long time and that have meshed quite well and are able to lead those teams into consistent victories.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good points there. And definitely a difference in coaching style and team for sure. But Bob, what are your thoughts here on coaches and how much responsibility they should have?
Well, I think in a perfect world, they should have all of it. The players don't need to be answering questions of why certain people were played, yada, yada, yada. That should fall on the coaches. But at the same time, I don't know how much power each coach has, and what their actual responsibilities are, and who actually made the calls, and did the players change the calls mid-match? I don't know what all is entailed in other sports. I mean, you have some players that call shots, but most of them don't. You have your team captains, but it's just kind of interesting, and I would say they should just take it. Whether it's their fault or not, that's kind of their role.
Yeah, and it seems like regardless that they should just take it, but it's a stylistic change or choice rather. Pesto, what are you thinking here with coaches?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Bob. I mean, publicly, the coaches need to take all the responsibility that they can get away with, and that's part of their job, because you take the public blame, you take the focus of the public ire, and you do that because you're taking the pressure off of the players so that they don't have to deal with that stress, so that all they need to focus about is playing. I think that since we're really talking about Kai here, even though there have been other coaches that have already been sacked, even though there's already questions about other coaches, since we're really talking about Kai, I think, yes, he's taking a lot of the blame, but I think he also needs to say to his players, listen, going out and tweeting about how sorry you are, I mean, yes, you should be trying to connect with your fans. You should be building your own personal brand. But sacrificing yourselves so that your fans are happy, it's not helping your mentality. However, I mean, obviously Slasher and Sideshow are going to know more about the inner workings of teams than I do, because they talk to the players more. I'm not going to try to say I understand what's going on in the locker rooms. There might be things that I don't know about. But ultimately, the buck stops with the GM, or if there's not a GM, with the owner. It's up to the GM or the owner to decide, is the coach doing a good job? They're going to know more about it than I do. And if the coach still has the GM or the owner's confidence, I don't think it's really the fans' place to be pitchforks and torches at the coaches.
Right. Well, the one thing that we talked about on High Noon Podcast yesterday is that the GM or owner is not going to fire themselves. But that's, I guess, another conversation to have. But Sideshow, last words here on coaching and Overwatch League and maybe some of the differences between sports.
Well, just to take it from the GM point just then, a lot of the GMs don't know the game as well as the coaches or the players as well. So it's difficult for them to assess in a lot of these situations whether the coach is doing a good job, I think. And when you looked at the LA Valiant, who recently got rid of Cuddles, and they produced some video recently that was like, it was actually incredibly transparent. And they were like, we thought that a lot of our issues with how the team was working was based around the coach. When we got rid of him, we were like, oh shit, it actually wasn't him. So I think that it's fine that the coaches should take responsibility. And when we're talking about in-game decisions of who you want to field, what strategies you're going to run, this is down to the coaching staff. This should not be down to the players. But because there's so little transparency in general about the responsibilities of the coaches, and for certain coaches, they don't have as much power as they should do because either it hasn't been handed to them from the top management or the players. They don't have enough coaches. So, for example, like the Florida Mayhem, like Mineral, for example, was just trying to do that all on his own when he's more of an analyst rather than a coach. Like, you can't say that it's equal all round and like there's an equal responsibility that is almost 100% on all of the coaches. We just don't have enough information at the moment or transparency from each team to be able to make those decisions from the outside. But internally, I agree that it is on the coaches. If you wanted to structure something as well as possible, you would have a hierarchical system where you had, for example, 4 top coaches like Seoul do, like Spitfire. Although for Spitfire, we thought that was kind of Bishop running a lot of the decisions as the head coach. Then he leaves and they still do the same thing. So who knows what's going on for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, it's just another interesting wrinkle in the whole landscape of the Overwatch League, but we will move on. That does bring us to the end of the first round. Real quick recap of the scores. We've got Bob with 14 points. We've got Pesto with 15, Slasher with 16, and Sideshow just a little bit ahead with 17. But as I always say, it's anyone's game as we go into round number 2.
Round 2. Capture the objective.
So let's shift focus back to Dallas. And I wanted to start with you here, Bob, because I know this one's got I don't know. I guess I'm just interested as to what you think on this. But with XQC leaving and some rumors and some signings from Dallas, does Dallas need to clean house and just get rid of the envious lineup that hasn't worked thus far in Overwatch League?
No. I mean, we got. It's unfortunate what happened with XQC because they practiced with him. He was going to be the main tank. He, as Slasher pointed out earlier, like that's a very important position that they've had Taimu playing. Like it's not. That was a big problem. OGE coming in, I don't know much about him. I'm hoping that he is a really good main tank. Wish we could have got Fisher, but I don't think they need to clean house at all. I mean, they need to give Rascal a little more practice on Genji, and AKM's a beast. They probably need to help Effect with a little anger management maybe, or tilt management, but yeah. I think they have a good base. They have, they have Harry Hook. Like, I mean, Costa, Zen. I mean, they've got a good core. They just need a couple pieces and maybe a change of coaching. That might be the thing. Yeah.
But Pesto, thoughts here? Should Dallas stay the course and make minor improvements, or should they just wipe it clean, nuke the team, and start something anew?
I think they have a lot of problems, but let's be brutally honest. Envious was not a world-class team leading into Overwatch League. They were great in the tank meta. It fit their style very well. They had the right pieces at the right time, but their performance in Apex in Season 2 and Season 3 was not top of the world. When they came back to North America, I mean, they were the best team, but that's not really saying much. Every other team in the league, either with the exception of Mayhem, every other team in the league either added a bunch of great players or built from scratch around a bunch of great players. And I mean, XQC, very good player, got suspended. Seagull, not top of the world. I mean, how many players on Top Fuel would you say are top 5 in the world in their position? Can you say that about Effect anymore? Can you say that about Chips anymore? I mean, we all expected them to do very well because of inertia. because they did very well before. But when you look at this roster, I think you have the building blocks, but I think you definitely need another. You need a main tank. You probably need another off tank. You need to give time for AKM and Rascal and for them to figure it all out. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's somewhere in between blow it up and start all over and everything is fine. I think they definitely need new pieces. But I think, and I'm guilty of this too. I think that we put the weight of unrealistic expectations on them, and going into the league.
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely put a lot of expectations on them, but I don't know too many people who are saying that this is fine for Dallas Fuel right now.
Everything is not fine.
Yeah.
Nothing is fine in this situation about this team.
No, I never said. I never
should they
said
be getting-
everything's fine. I just said it's somewhere in between.
Oh,
Everything is
yes,
fine
it's
and
somewhere
blow it up.
between 0 and 100 for sure. I agree with
which is
you.
very different from saying it's 100.
It's marginally different, but I guess that's another conversation. I don't know, Pesto. That seems a little.
It's 50 or 60.
I
it's
gotta
not
I gotta take a point away for that at least. But Sideshow, what are your thoughts here? Should they blow Dallas Fuel up in terms of the team, or should they stay the course?
I don't think they need to utterly clean. If by clean house you mean just start afresh with a whole new core, like I need to clean house. They don't need to clean house, right? What they need is a little bit of spring clean, and then they need to smack some people with the feather duster afterwards as well. So I think that for starters, the main tank position is like been awful for Envious for a while. Actually, it was like a big flaw for them when they were playing in Apex. If you're aiming to be one of the best teams in the world, which they were like top 5 in the world when they were coming into the Overwatch League. And so when they had when they were bringing XQC in, okay, that's an experiment that went wrong. Now they're relying on OGE. Okay, we'll see where that goes as well. But the problem for me as well is that they don't have anybody to fill in the off tank position where Mickey's looked lackluster, and they also are still stuck in this position where they can't play a range of compositions based on their DPS, because they're now relying more heavily on AKM in a lot of these compositions, and Effect plays a very solo style. So, okay, now that XQC's banned and you don't have to deal with that, or he's what do you call it?
Yeah, he's released. He's not technically banned. He's
not
released. Yeah.
But now that he's out of the team, you don't have any of these excuses about, okay, the team was all over the place. We didn't know who to structure the team around. XQCs in and out all over the place. Right now it's back to basics again. Now you've got a team that you can work with. OGE's coming in. When they get their pieces finally here, this is when you can start saying, is it working or not? The problem for them is by that time that's past the mid-season signing period. So they have one last chance to really get things back together, I think.
Can I just say, though, it all doesn't matter if OGE winds up being discovered as a booster and gets banned, because InVen is already making that accusation. And if they wind up with 2 main tanks banned, I think that's up a bridge.
I'm just going to say, for the purposes of this show, because I don't want it to be 4 hours long, we're not going to go into that. But Slasher, you've already said everything is not fine. How far does Dallas need to go here?
I mean, along with sources telling me the XQC was going to be released, the same sources say that it's very possible Taimu and Coco are going to be released. And to be honest, they probably should. Coco has not played at all since all of this has happened, and they put Taimu in main tank over Coco. So if you're going to do that to begin with, then just get rid of Coco. You already have Taimu creating the same type of problems that XQC has in terms of public perception, internal problems, and he's not even playing DPS, which is what you brought him on the team to do to begin with. So if you're not putting him on DPS and you're making him play main tank, there's no reason to have either of these two players. And if you're going to do that by then, well, then why don't you just blow it up? I mean, the other players on the team aren't happy to begin with. Chipsogen wasn't happy because he wasn't getting playing time. Seagull currently isn't happy because he's not getting playing time. He's forced to play Diva as a backup to Mickey, and who knows how long that's going to take him to get to that level that Mickey is at, considering that's one of his best heroes, one of the big reasons they were winning those Apex championships. I don't see that really happening, and Custa is kind of just like left out in the wind, considering that you have Harry Hook wanting to play all the time, and you have Chipsogen also upset for playing time. So the entire roster at this point really needs a lot of work. For me, I would get rid of Taimu, I would get rid of Coco, and I would consider continuing to get rid of maybe 1 or 2 more players and continue to pick up free agents. OGE is not getting until the 3rd stage. He may not be able to play anyway. If this team wants any chance of getting into the playoffs and not being a complete joke from coming into the season as one of the favorites turning into the team they are now, they need to make drastic changes. And I personally think that Kai needs to be in the discussion in terms of changing this coaching staff. I know he's been with that team for a while, but if you're changing the players and he's not going to have that same connection to them if they're gone anyway, maybe you change the coach too.
Yeah, so the full swath of answers here. Blow it up to maybe it's not so bad, but we'll move on. And I promise everyone that this whole episode is not going to be about Dallas Fuel. Maybe next week. But we do have a different match to talk about here. 2 teams that are doing quite well in the season and in this stage. Possibly a match of the week here. New York Excelsior versus Seoul Dynasty. Pesto, we'll start with you. Who do you have here?
I'm going to continue my streak of being wishy-washy. Although, actually, you know what? I'm going to go with Seoul. Seoul hasn't lost yet. I don't see any indications that they're going to. I don't see any reason to doubt them now. Yes, they have dropped maps in every match they have played except for Valiant. So that is San Fran, Fuel, Gladiators, Shanghai, and Philly.
Shanghai, let's not forget that one.
Yeah. Although Shanghai has taken maps off of teams unexpectedly for a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, New York hasn't been invincible either. They lost to London. They dropped maps to Philly and to Mayhem, which at the time was not the Mayhem that beat Fuel. I think the big difference is Sabiobi is now more of a focusing tracers. More focusing supports than focusing tracers. And if he doesn't go back to doing that, I mean, tracer is a point of weakness for Seoul, whereas their supports are not. So I think that the strategy New York has been showing lately doesn't match up against Seoul well. And I also think that the maps are not the maps, but the rest of the matches in the week sort of a wash. New York is playing Shanghai the next day, which is really easy, but London is the match Seoul has to prep for London,
right?
But they have 2 full days, and the map pool is pretty close. So I don't think either team is going to be doing weird things because of the rest of their opponents. So Seoul, but narrowly.
Gotcha. Sideshow, you're going to have to make this call on the air later, but who do you have here, New York or Seoul?
I think that actually Seoul might be the better team, but I'm still going to go with New York for this one because Seoul have to split their preparation time between the 2 other best teams in the league, New York and then London. I don't think the 2 days is enough just to be like, okay, we'll all focus on New York and then we'll just have 2 days to kind of try and figure out what London's doing. I think that New York as well have had fantastic success working around Sabiobi being more aggressive and opening up their backline because Jonak and Ark are so good at being able to protect themselves, running a lot of Ana Zen or Mercy Zen and a little bit of Lucio Zen as well. But even if they go back to having Sabiobi in a more passive position, that's going to play pretty well into Seoul, I think. All across these maps, dive comps are pretty good. They're going towards Hollywood and Gibraltar for the final 2 maps. Seoul should be performing at a great level there. They have started becoming a more aggressive team. Munchkin is finding his position. Fleder can go wild on these maps, but they're going to be trying to focus down Ark and Jonak. And I think a couple of small adjustments from NYXL, pull a Sabiobi further back, have Meko focus more on peeling, and they'll end up outplaying them strategically.
Definitely a lot of good points there. Slasher, who do you have here, NY or Seoul?
I'm really liking New York in this matchup, not just because I'm from New York, because I'm definitely not a fanboy of that team. I mean, they have some very good advantageous maps in this series, including Gibraltar, and Hanamura. I mean, really, the entire map pool, for me, favors New York. They like playing Widow on Pine, which he could do pretty much on offense through all of the maps, and on defense, maybe on 2 of them, including Gibraltar. They like running this Mercy Zen, Ana Zen setups on defense, which they can pretty much do on all these maps too. So even though Seoul has looked better so far in this stage, I think these are the perfect maps for New York to play against this team in the style they want to, with dive comps, with Widow, with a lot of hit scan, with Ana Zen, Mercy Zen defenses, and I think they'll be able to get the better of Seoul, win 3-1.
Definitely a call that I can attest to liking here. But Bob, last word here: Seoul versus New York. Who do you have?
I have NYXL, and for the same reasons everybody pointed out, but I'll say the 3 top reasons are Jonak, Libero, and Sabiobi, and in that order.
Yeah, it's really tough to bet against any of those 3 players, let alone all 3 of them on the same roster. But let's move on to the last question here in round number 2. Houston started out a little bit rough at the beginning of stage 1. Then they came back. They had a number of really great weeks. They kind of they rode the 4 Overwatch sort of train into a heartbreaker at the end of the stage 1, and then started doing well, but now they're kind of on almost a downturn here, losing some key matches that perhaps many would have thought that they'd won. So, Sideshow, I'll start with you here. Is Houston in panic mode here, or are they still all right?
I think Houston are in panic mode. I don't think they necessarily need to be in panic mode, but I think they definitely are. I think the mentality portion of it is definitely playing into it, because when you start losing after having won for so long and you're feeling really confident, and then you don't change that much, but now you're just getting kind of battered by teams. This is where you start to lose confidence in your playstyle and switch things up and put people in uncomfortable situations. So something that's been really evident to me has been the way that Moomer and whoever their tracer is, it's normally Jake for a lot of these maps, have been playing. So at the start of stage 2, obviously Jake was kind of new to the role because he'd been playing so much Junkrat before in the previous one. Like, great style, worked superbly. They go into stage 2 and teams are still trying to figure out the new meta and figure out how other teams are playing. So you can't really counter-strat teams that well. And Moomer and Jake are playing like kind of on their own. They're counter-diving, so they wait for the other team to initiate, then they jump into their backlines. And Jake doesn't need the best aim there because he's just following up on Moomer's damage or damage from the rest of their team and going in at the right times and killing people. And now people have realized that if you put more pressure on Moomer and Jake, rather than just going balls deep on the rest of their team, you get like ridiculous value out of that because they can't hold themselves up in the Tracer 1v1s. It's not so much that they just straight up die every time. That doesn't happen, but they do get pressured out of situations or have to run around and like farm health packs all over the place. And Moomer takes too much damage. So I think their style at the moment has been kind of ruined. And because they don't have that crazy tracer that can just adapt and play whatever style because they don't have the mechanics, then they're in a bit of a rut right now and trying to figure out where best to go from here.
A rut, to say the least. But Slasher, do you think it's full-blown panic mode for Houston, or is it like Sideshow said, just a little bit of a rut?
They are getting close. I mean, I think a statistic that was on the Watchpoint show had Clockwork and Jake as both the lowest damage dealers of all DPS players in the league. And Tracer really is the most important hero for me, and it continued to have been in Overwatch. It's still, now that Mercy is nerfed, I think you have Tracer and Zen fighting off against who the best hero is, and Tracer has continued to be a perma pick in every single comp on every single map. No matter what is run, you will see a Tracer more than likely. So if Tracer is going to have such a big impact, and you have your 2 players in the lowest in the league, you are going to have problems. They've shown they do not want to play Mendo, which I think is probably fair from them because we haven't seen Mendo play in an official tournament for quite a long time, but he always had a really good tracer. Yeah. So maybe you should actually just try and bring it out now. I have heard sources tell me that Houston might be picking up a player quite soon, but from what I know about this player, it is not going to be helping their tracer problems. It might be helping their DPS issues, but not this specifically, and I really do think this is a key thing they have to look into. They have some hard games coming up soon, and I think some of the distractions that have hit other teams are going to be coming to that team. So I think they have some problems there. Yeah.
Interesting. Bob, what do you think? Is Houston getting to the Dallas Fuel mode where they might be panicking a ton here?
Heck no. They are still number 5 overall. Tracers needed now. They don't have one. That everybody knows that, but Blizzard tries to shake it up constantly. We got this new character, Brigitte, that's coming in that's supposedly going to stop tracers.
Trash.
So
I've never heard it called Brigitte.
Brigitte, as Ryan says it in game, Brigitte. So I don't know how to say it, but when Baguette comes in, she will change things quite a bit. And who is a person that can really figure out how to get the most out of characters? least we saw Jake get it out of Junk before anybody knew that he was that powerful. So I say Jake's in for the long haul. He's extremely smart, and yeah, they should probably look into picking up a Tracer, but I don't think they should be that worried.
Just ask him to prom already. Just do it. But Pesto, your last words here for you. Is Houston in panic mode?
Panic mode? No. I'd say they're worried, but they also realize that they have time to recover. Remember, this is a team that completely flopped out the gate. They looked terrible in the preseason. They lost their 2 first matches in stage 1, and then wound up being in the playoff. They've shown the ability to adapt. I think that they definitely have Tracers as a point of weakness. They are, I think, they're 7th in the standings right now, which means that they're behind all of the other teams that you would feel are safe and above all the other teams that you would think are in trouble. So if they can beat Gladiators this week, then that would be a really good sign, but it's doable. It's not a guarantee. I think, I don't know. They're going to beat Shock, I think. They're going to lose to Seoul. If they beat Gladiators, they're 6-4, which is respectable. I think that they're going to need to take some time in between stages 2 and 3 and really figure out how they're going to solve the issue. I think part of the reason why Jake has been immovable in that lineup is because he is part of their shot calling system. He's part of their brain trust, and that sort of crimps your style if you can't remove him and he's not carrying on the position you need him to. But I don't know. And finally, I'm going to throw a little bit of wrinkle out. I think that, speaking of San Francisco, I think that they're going to have way more Tracer players than they need. And maybe you pick up Dante if you can convince Dante that he's not going to get much playing time. Or maybe you pick up another Tracer just so that you have depth. And even if you're going to play even if you're going to play Jake a lot of the time, having other Tracers to learn from, not the worst thing. So I think small adjustments. I think they're worried, but I think that they have time to adjust. They don't need to go into panic mode.
Interesting. Well, I think this week will definitely be indicative, and maybe we'll be having this conversation in a little more urgency next week, or maybe it'll all blow over. But we will wait until then. That will bring us into round number 3, or bring us to the end of round 2, rather. Real quick recap of the scores. We've got Blaze and Bob holding out the rear here, 33 points. We've got Slasher with 36 points, Pesto with 37, and Sideshow pulling away a little bit with 40. But, of course, going into the third round, it is still anyone's game.
The payload is approaching its destination.
And this, of course, round 3 is the buy or sell round. We're doing super great on time, so we're gonna run through this. It's gonna be great. But we'll start with you here first, Slasher. Monte Cristo tweeted out, "It's becoming increasingly clear that GC Busan peaked hard for the Apex Season 4 playoffs and struggles to maintain that level of consistency." So the question here is, buy or sell? Has the GC Busan or part of London Spitfire roster peaked back in Apex?
Yeah, I'm going to buy this. I think Prophet is by far the most impressive player from that roster, and the rest of the team may very well be Kongdu players plus Prophet, and or maybe you have Fury play here and there. But I pretty much got to agree with that. I think that Bishop leaving and being kind of kicked out by the players, them bringing in Tizzy, them trying out some new DPS players is indicative of Busan peaking and them having some problems with the roster right now. Would not surprise me to see them selling off more players, most of them being from that Busan roster.
For sure. Bob, are you buying or selling that Busan has peaked?
I am buying. I mean, I don't see why they don't at all times have Bedozan and Birdring in. I mean, there's no reason for that. I understand having 12-man rosters because internal scrims are great, but when you have stars of that caliber, you just want them in the whole time. I mean, they don't bench Jonak in NYXL. I mean,
well, and part of that reason is because they don't have anyone to put in for him. But I get your point.
But they wouldn't.
That's true. Well, I would hope that they wouldn't, at least as an NYXL fan. I would hope that they wouldn't, but they don't have the ability to. But Pesto, are you buying or selling that Busan has peaked?
I'm soft buying it. Yeah, as a 6-man unit, they probably peaked. But I also think it's a bit of an unfair statement because you're only talking about the players. They lost their coach, and we don't really know how much strategy, how much of their ability to come up from behind and surprise a bunch of people was strategy that the coach had. So we're missing that piece. And obviously, that bridge has been crossed. We're not going to do anything about it. I think that they're solid players. I think that they would be improvements on some teams, probably not on all the teams. Having a couple of them around for depth is going to be useful. But yeah, the non-GC Busan players, most of the non-GC Busan players probably not going to get much playing time.
That was a lot of double negatives there, but I think I got what you meant. But Sideshow, last word here, buying or selling the GC Busan roster having peaked?
I'm going to go against everybody here. I'm not buying this for a moment. I think that it's first of all, it's a bit of an unfair comparison because they haven't been getting scrim time and they've been relegated to the B team. So they don't have the ability to run internal scrims right now. You have to run gesture and profit in both of these teams. So there's no way that their B team, the GC Busan team, are actually getting anywhere near the same scrim time as their A team. And they're prepping for like the worst level teams. And this was a team that always relied on teamwork. This wasn't a team that was like just some crazy individual players that you could just throw them into a match and they're going to slam people. They relied on like setting up their teamwork and stuff. Yeah, they lost one of their coaches coming into it. They also signed 2 of them. So it's difficult to tell what that one coach was doing. Hokyori, I think it was, who ended up going to Seoul. And they had big diva changes going into it. So Wu Hyal is definitely somebody who I would say has looked a lot worse compared to his Apex Season 4 performances. Hagapyeon, I would also say that you normally run Badoshin over him, but they are running Gesture and Profit in all of these teams. Like these are the 2 standout players across the entirety of their roster. These are their 2 best players, along with probably Badoshin as well. I think Closer and Nuss are interchangeable. And you can run Hureg whenever you want, like a Faramap. Like we saw him come out on Eichenwald or sometimes on Li Jiang occasionally. So I think if you're running GC Busan and you would like giving them full scrim time all the time, sure, like they'd still be a really good team. I think they'd be better than what they've shown so far at the moment. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't make upgrades to that team, and that's what London have done. They've made upgrades by adding in Badoshin and by adding in Birdring and Fury as well.
For sure. I think a lot of good points made. We'll just have to wait and see how that one ends up turning out. But let's move on and talk about San Francisco Shock here. Obviously, official word, the Architect, and I'm an idiot and didn't write down the second person. Moth. Yes, thank you. I knew I had enough people on here that would be able to chime in instantly that I didn't need to do any work because I'm an idiot. Architect and Moth signed here for the San Francisco. So, Bob, the question here is, are you buying or selling Architect and to an extent Moth making a difference here and making a splash for San Francisco?
I'm going to buy because Architect, awesome Genji. That's what they haven't had. I mean, Baby Bay is awesome at the hit scan, but I mean, he's not really a Genji. We haven't seen anything flashy there. So yeah, I mean, if you need dive, he's gonna be great. I mean, it just all depends on the meta, and that's gonna change every single stage. So getting at least one expert everywhere is a good call.
For sure. Pesto, are you buying or selling these San Francisco additions?
I'm buying it. I think that Architect brings a knife to a gunfight. And I think that despite conventional wisdom, Shock really needed to bring a knife to their gunfight. I think that being able to field a top Genji opens up a lot of possibilities that they didn't necessarily have before. And I think if there's one knock on this, I think that they're adding in too many variables at the same time. And they probably would have preferred to not have 2 new players coming in and 2 players aging in all at the same time, because it's going to make it sort of hard to integrate everyone at the same time, I think. But, I mean, it's a smart pickup, I think, especially Architect. And obviously, because I'm friends with Harsha, I wish them all the best, except when they're playing Mayhem.
Well, maybe they don't need as much luck or well wishes there. But Sideshow, are you buying or selling these additions made by San Francisco?
I'll certainly buy Architect, and I think that somebody else should have bought Architect, and possibly not San Francisco Shock. But I've got to admit that I don't think I've actually watched any games of Moth, because he was playing on teams that were just like below the level of what I was watching. It was like Toronto Esports was the last team he played on or something. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to speak to him at all, but Architect is a phenomenal player, has been kind of hyped up for a while now, ever since he didn't get into the Overwatch League, and has just turned 18, I believe, like about a week ago or something like that. He is a guy that you can build the team around. When he came into X6, made a massive difference there, and it fits the one of the problems that San Francisco Shock has been having. And when you consider that they're also going to be getting Super and Sinatra, this could just look like a brand new team, really, when they turn the corner, when they unlock their new players and they get Architect down. Mm-hmm. Was that going to be stage 3 or something? So yeah, I think this is going to make a massive difference. As to what Moth can provide, not really sure.
Yeah, I love how you're just like, oh, he just wasn't at a high enough level for me I couldn't waste my time on players such as him.
Listen, there's plebs everywhere. You can't keep track of them all.
For sure. But Slasher, last word here. Are you buying or selling Architect and Moth here for San Francisco?
I'm buying, because I don't think Shock has any idea what the hell they've been doing to start the season. They got IDD QD and then never played him. They got Nevix and decided to put him on Diva, even though he may very well be the best projectile player on the team. I was never truly impressed with Dante or Baby Bay playing projectiles. So you have 2 players on DPS that are playing the same heroes, and it seems like since Sinatra wasn't able to play, they fuddled the entire DPS lineup for the first 2 stages. So just because they've had a terrible roster decision making in terms of putting together the team, they need these 2 players so badly beyond the skills that Architect and Moth bring themselves.
It's funny that the team that was lauded as having too many DPS players messed up the DPS line for their team coming into the season. But we will move on and still talk about San Francisco here, and we've kind of alluded to it. It's almost like inferring based on what's happening with San Francisco, but we're getting Sinatra, we've got Architect, we've got all sorts of an overload of DPS players coming into and already having been on San Francisco. So where does this leave Dante? So Peso, I want to know here, are you buying or selling Dante staying on San Francisco Shock?
I'm going to buy it. I think that you don't get to be at his level without having a cosmic fuck ton of self-belief. And Dante has shown that he deserves an opportunity to fight for his spot. When these other players come in, he might very well lose his starting spot. But he has done enough on that team to warrant being in the conversation. He's not just a placeholder. I think it's very possible if another team approaches and says, listen, we want to offer you a virtually guaranteed starting role, that he might jump ship. But I don't really see... I don't see that happening. I alluded to it earlier, but I don't really see it happening. I think that his best bet is to fight for a starting role, to say, all right, I've been here before, I have the cohesion. I might not get 100% of the playtime, but I'll still be a valuable role player. And if he loses his starting spot, he can fight to gain it back. And if all else fails, he can fight to make a good impression, maybe get picked up on another team. I think his best shot right now is to stay with the
for definitely a lot of good points there. Sideshow, are you buying or selling Dante having a spot on San Francisco Shock now?
I think I'm going to buy this one. I think Dante adds something still that they don't have from any of their other players, namely a guy that can play Tracer and Genji at the same time. Even when they bring in Architect, I've never seen him play Tracer. I mean, it's very possible that the guy does have like a really good Tracer. But for example, if you're playing Gibraltar at the moment, the meta is revolving pretty much around Widowmaker Genji. But then when you get to the 3rd stage, some teams like to swap it up and play like Widowmaker Tracer instead. So in that kind of situation, it makes sense to run Dante Baby Bay maybe rather than Architect. I also think that if he's not going to stay in San Francisco, somebody else needs to want to buy him. And there are other free agents out there from Korea or also some other guys in the West that I would probably pick up over Dante depending on the price point. So I think he'll end up staying in San Francisco. I think they'll find a way to work him in a little bit.
Slasher, buying or selling Dante staying in the Bay?
Pesto, I think it's cute that you feel like Dante has enough clout to demand a trade to wherever he wants. Like the Gladiators are just gonna, oh, Dante, you want to leave? Oh, that's cool. Let's just get rid of you. If they get a really good offer, in terms of the amount of money they're going to pay Gladiators to buy out his contract. Then they will sell him. I actually think he should stay for a totally different reason, and that is because he plays Sombra, and in this next meta, we're going to see a whole lot of Sombra unless Blizzard changes this character, which I don't think they will. So the entirety of Stage 3 is going to be Sombra and half the comps for all the maps, and he still is one of the best Sombra players in the league right now, and I think he is also the Shock's best Sombra player. So specifically because of that one hero, he will stay. But other than that, because Sinatra is coming back, and you have bringing in Architect, I would rather try to get rid of him if I was Gladiators.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what Dante where he ends up, if anywhere. But Bob, last words here: buying or selling Dante staying in San Francisco?
Yeah, that was a really good point about Sombra and the meta changing, and so that I didn't even think about that, but. I do think that he should stay. I think he should for sure stay. I talked to Harsha last night, and he spoke in code and mystery. But what I took from it personally was that the Shock's going to look to play certain players on certain maps and try and diversify the players throughout maps. So if that's what they're going to do, I think it keeps their players fresh. And why not have two awesome tracers? Why not have Sinatra starts next week? So I think that they're gonna still use him.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to just wait and see what happens with Dante moving forward. But we are going to move into the last question here before the finalists are chosen and face off in the finals. In this one, we're going to turn the eye over to the Florida Mayhem. I don't know any other. You can't say that any other team in the Overwatch League doubled the number of wins they got last week, but the Florida Mayhem certainly did. So, Sideshow, has Mayhem turned a corner here? Are they becoming a real team, or was this just a fluke this week?
I think they definitely turned a corner, but I don't think that necessarily makes them a great team. I think there's a lot of corners before they get to it. It's a very wiggly road before they get to becoming a great team. But you've got to say that before this, they didn't look like they were capable of beating pretty much anybody other than Shanghai. It was like, it wasn't even like they were hanging out with San Francisco, Shock, and Dallas at the bottom of the table. They were literally only hanging out with Shanghai, but they were still a tier above Shanghai when they actually played them head to head, like when they put their 100% into it. So now it looks like they're capable of taking matches off teams that are struggling a little bit, like Houston, like Dallas. They had their opportunities to win both of those games, absolutely. So I think they have turned the corner. I think they've figured out that when they play a bit more aggressive and when they have Logic's now on this meta where he can do a lot more with his kind of backline tracer, individualistic kind of play. And we saw Vic just unlocked for whatever reason. The team has decided not to use him super defensively, and now he can actually play his game. It's now looking like they're finding their footing a little bit in stage 2.
What do you think here, Slasher? Buying or selling Florida Mayhem actually turning a corner and becoming a real team?
Look, I mean, in closed beta, Tavik was the best player in all of Overwatch, and for a very long time, he was considered the best player in all of Overwatch. And as time went on, he really lost his spot. And going into OWL, that team did not look good. And it really was good to see a return to form here, to be able to clutch out Gibraltar and to be able to continue to send him to the next map to win that series. So I'm really happy for him to be able to play well and get a win. But let's be real, guys. They are 2-14 in the season. No, they have not turned a corner. They had to beat a Dallas team that completely blew the series because Kai doesn't know what he's doing coaching, making weird decisions, and the Dallas Fuel pretty much broke down in that match. There's no way Florida should even have 2 wins so far. There's no way I can see them even getting another 2 wins to the end stage 2. No, they have not turned the corner. They're lucky they got 1 win against Dallas. It's not going to get any better from here.
Some bold claims, definitely some bold claims there. But Bob, what do you think here? Your boys, man, they lost here to Florida. What are you thinking about Florida?
Yeah. Well, I'm getting pumped up from Slasher here. You're getting me pumped up right now. But yeah, like hard sell. Hard sell. There's no way that you can take what happened. I mean, like Dallas didn't even play XQC. There was obviously already turmoil in the team, and it was a lucky week for them. Tavik looked really good, like way better than he's looked any week prior. He was killing it with Genji. Is that gonna stick? I don't know. I'm pretty sure other teams that properly prepare for him are going to be able to really shut them down. So no, I'm going to hard sell this one.
Definitely. And Pesto, I saved you here for last because I know this Florida Mayhem team is near and dear to your heart. What do you think?
I'm gonna buy. Can't not root for my hometown team. You think they've beaten all the hope out of me already, but they haven't managed it yet. This team has shown pockets of promise. I think they cleared an important mental hurdle in picking up their second win. I think they picked that. Certainly, taking it very close to Outlaws also helped them. They've got Ryder and Zappis in LA. They've got 2 more players on the way. I think maybe they can beat Shock in week 5. I think if Shock doesn't immediately gel, they're still a bit vulnerable. I think maybe they can take some maps off the 2 teams in LA this week, but I don't think they're going to win either one. I think a goal for them right now is to finish 10th. I think that they can do that if they hold off Shanghai.
Congratulations.
And if they beat Seoul in the rankings. But it's
start somewhere.
It's certainly not the bar that we were hoping for at the beginning of this season. But I think even if they're not going to win that many more games, I think that they're going to not have as many embarrassing losses.
Yeah,
and they're not going to be quite as painful to root for. Not hide your shirt territory.
I've stuck my neck out so many times for them in hopes that we're gonna see less Tavik and more Pluppy back in the old days. But it just doesn't seem like that's happened quite yet. But that is going to bring us to the end of the regular play here. Quick recap of the scores. We've got Blazing Bob here, forever 4th place with 55 points.
Everybody's got their role, my friend. Everybody's got their role.
We've got Slasher in with 56 points, and we've also got our 2 finalists here to move into the final question. We've got Pesto Enthusiast with 59 points and Sideshow here with 61. So we're going to move into this final question, and there's no points being given out. It's Pesto versus Sideshow. You're each going to make your decision and make your argument here, and I'm just going to pick the winner. This is the most fun / also hardest part of the show for me, but it must happen. So the final question here is, which team do you think will make the biggest improvement after the roster changes that we've seen so far? So a lot of teams have shipped players, they've brought players in, they've traded, etc. Which team do you think of those is going to have the biggest improvement afterwards? A random coin flip has decided that Pesto, you are going to answer this one first.
This is really difficult because if you look at all the teams at the bottom of the table, I think that it's easier to say you're going to have a huge improvement if you just start winning a few more games. I want to say that Mayhem is going to start winning a lot more games, but I'm actually going to go with San Francisco here, because not only are they adding in a couple of roles that they've been missing, but they're also going to be unlocking 2 more players. I think that having 4 more options and having it's going to unlock at just the right time. They're going to have these last 2 weeks where there's really no expectations, and then they're going to have the stage 2 to stage 3 gap. I think that their definition of getting better is that they're going to win, maybe go 4 and 6 in the stages, maybe possibly 5 and 5 if they figure things out. I think that in terms of who's absolutely going to take it the most advantage of their signings, you have to go with them just because they're so low right now, and they have a lot of tools that they desperately needed all of a sudden.
Sideshow, same question here. Which team do you think is going to improve the most after their roster changes?
There's only one correct answer here, Pesto Enthusiast, and I'm glad you chose the wrong one. It's the Shanghai Dragons, mate. How could you possibly pick any other team than the trash can that's just been sitting at 12th place? There is never going to be anybody with their current roster, and you've now added 4 legitimate players. Like, you've taken a team that was just nowhere, just absolutely nowhere. Shock have already won some games. Like, even if they improve to the top of the table, this isn't going to even be close to the improvement that the Shanghai Dragons are going to make. They're adding in Fearless, who's like a legitimately could be top tier main tank. If their coaching staff works with him well, who knows what that's going to be like. And then they've got Sky, who came from a legitimately great Chinese team that kind of got shafted. They got Gagurian there, who's been sitting at the top of the ladder for ages. And then they've got Ado, who's like a genuinely good Genji Tracer player who's going to complement them really well. I think these 4 additions are exactly what they need to be able to make a competent team out of the mess of Shanghai Dragons. And I think they'll, even if they only go to improve to be a mid-table team, or even if they only go to improve to be like a 9th place team, that's such a momentous improvement that it has to be the most improved after the mid-season signings.
Hold on. Here's why you're wrong. Because if Shanghai pops off, that means that Mayhem might come last.
well might.
I didn't think that I was going to say this before the signings happened, but Shanghai Dragons is winning this one. I gotta agree with you here. I do think that the Shock definitely have a lot of room to improve, and they have added a lot of players, and they definitely. But I mean, they're going from a team that is probably not even going to win a lot of games in contenders to potentially a team that is quite good. So Sideshow, you got this one, bud. You're winning here. You get to sell out / promote, do whatever you want here. The floor is yours, and
I don't even have anything to sell.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Well, you better start making something up, because the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. You can find all of my God tier analysis on Twitter. No, you actually can't. I don't even tweet that much. But definitely, I'm going to use this portion to sell you on the desk segments. You know the part of the game, guys, where you normally go and get like a coffee or whatever, and then you come back when the next game starts? There's actually some good stuff that happens in that little break. So instead, next time you guys want to be tuning in for that portion, as long as I'm on the desk, not when Johnny or Crumbs or Brenna. But and then you want to tune in then, and then just kind of ride it through. Take your breaks like when some bad teams are playing, don't take the breaks when I'm on the desk.
Definitely a noble sell there for sure. I do want to congratulate everyone here, because I think this is the quickest show that we've had. It's still slightly over an hour, but we're getting there. So huge thanks to all of you. Guys, that's going to be it for the show. Huge thanks to Pesto, Sideshow, Slasher, Blaze and Bob. Thank you to all of you. All of their links to all their socials and stuff are going to be down in the description below, so that you can find them. Make sure you go follow all of them, and make sure you do definitely watch all of those desk segments, even the ones with Bren and Crumbs and Sideshow. I'll give them the shout out here. But that is going to be it here for Around the Payload, guys. Remember, I'm the Blevins for Pesto, Sideshow, Slasher, and Bob. Tune in next week and join us around the payload. Bye-bye.